Good morning, and thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we are continuing our study of the life and letters of the Apostle Peter by beginning our study of 2 Peter today. I thought between 1st and 2nd Peter, I would go ahead and read from the Annals of Tacitus the description of the persecution that the church is enduring and that resulted in the executions of both Peter and Paul in Rome during Nero's reign following the fire of Rome. Anyway, in the Annals of Tacitus, Tacitus, just a few decades after these events, writes about the way the Romans blamed the burning of Rome, the fire in Rome, on Nero, which is almost certainly the case, and how Nero tried to divert attention away from himself. And he writes, all human efforts, all the lavish gifts of the emperor and the propitiation of the gods did not banish the sinister belief that the fire was the result of an order by Nero. Consequently, to get rid of that report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class already hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. And a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out, not only in Judea, the first source of all evil. I think that's editorial, don't you think? But even in Rome, where all hideous and shameful things from every part of the world find their center and become popular. Yep, that's editorial. Accordingly, an arrest was first made of all who pleaded guilty. Then upon their information, an immense multitude was convicted, not so much for the crime of burning the city, as of hatred against mankind. Mockery of every sort was added to their death. They were sewn up in the skins of wild animals and were fed to the dogs and perished, or they were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt to serve as a nightly illumination when daylight had expired. Nero offered his gardens for such a spectacle and was exhibiting a show in the circus while he mingled with the people in the dress of a charioteer and stood aloft on a car. Hence, even for a criminal who deserved extreme and exemplary punishment, there arose a feeling of compassion, for it was not, as it seemed, for the public good that they were being tortured and executed, but in order to glut one man's cruelty that they were being destroyed. It's an amazing account and a chilling account, and lets you know exactly what was happening when Peter was writing 1st and 2nd Peter. Okay, let's introduce 2nd Peter. Paul's dead. We've already established that by our reading of the last few verses of 1 Peter. And Paul's guys in Rome are now working with Peter, who is also in Rome, and almost certainly in prison. He writes 2 Peter on the eve of his execution, something that he makes clear right there in the first chapter, beginning with verse 12. I'm about to be executed. I know this. Jesus has told me this, and so I need to write this before I go. 1 Peter was about persecution and how the church is going to face persecution, because the persecution is not going to be relentless. It's going to come in waves. In fact, between 149 AD and 282 AD, there won't be any empire-wide persecution of the church, although there's several incidents of local persecution because of Hadrian's Rescript, which we may talk about later. But there will be multiple attempts at genocide, of just exterminating all Christians. And so 1 Peter is written to explain how we survive this. Not just survive it with our lives intact, that's secondary. How do we survive this with our faith and our identity intact? That's primary. And that's what 1 Peter is about. 2 Peter is about the other problem the church is going to face going forward, and that is the problem of false teaching. And so 1 Peter is very clear about the false teaching that is about to come and that is already happening in the church. And he tells them how to identify it and what to do to survive it. The false teaching that he's going to be dealing with, the church is going to be dealing with going forward, has really little to do with the Judaizing that the Apostle Paul dealt with. But Paul already, in passages like 1 Corinthians and John, will later on in 1 John and 2 John, be dealing with a Greek form of false teaching, really philosophy that makes its way into the church, and it's based upon a Greek dualism, the whole notion that there is body and spirit. They have nothing to do with each other, or they are antithetical to each other, and that expresses itself in so many ways, in opposite ways. If you believe that flesh is evil and spirit is good, then you can become an ascetic, and you can deny your flesh, and you can layer on all kinds of Pharisaic sort of rules of what you can and can't do and can and can't eat. And people did that. Also, if you believe that flesh is evil and spirit is good, then you can say to yourself, as the Corinthians were saying, meat's for the belly and the belly for meats. I have a soul that I devote to God, and I have a body that I devote to pleasure, and that's just perfectly natural. And that expressed itself. Also, if you believe the body is evil, or different, or apart from the soul, then you start to deny, and this is the worst part, the bodily appearance of Jesus on this earth. And anyone who does this is an antichrist. That's what John says in 1 John. This is the big issue that's going to be faced, is that Jesus Christ actually came in the flesh. And so the eyewitnesses, the experiencing of Jesus with our senses to know that he was here, that we had our hands on his shoulder, that we saw him with our own eyes, we sat down and ate with him, and we watched him. All that's going to be so important to fight to combat this false teaching. The key word in 2 Peter is knowledge. The book begins with the word knowledge and it ends with the word knowledge. And throughout the book, knowledge is being repeated over and over again. You need to know this. You need to know Scripture. Know Scripture. And the cool thing about this book is that twice, the Apostle Peter links together the Old Testament Scripture and apostolic teaching, and he calls it all Scripture. That not only is Genesis through Zechariah Scripture, but the things we apostles have been sharing with you, that's Scripture too, and binding. And you need to know that if you're going to survive this. Okay, well, we have a lot more to say, but we'll have to say some more tomorrow because I've already taken almost 8 minutes of your time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes.